The one piece of equipment that makes the biggest difference in the look and feel and like the personality of your photos is going to be your lens. If you're just starting out, or when you're choosing a new lens, the two primary attributes you're going to be concerned with are focal length and aperture size. The obvious reason to go after a certain focal length is because the bigger the number, the farther your camera can see, the more zoomed in your picture is. It also means the more narrow the field of view is. So one reason you'd want a longer lens is obviously to see further. If you want to take a picture of a bird that's in a tree, you want to be close up, you got to zoom in. But a second reason is to reshape the room that you're in or reshape the scene that you're taking. Your subject could be the same size, you could be right next to someone, your subject could be the same size in the frame, but you might want to change what the whole environment looks like, and you can do that by changing the focal length. Right now we're shooting on a 16mm lens, and so you can see a lot of this room, and you can see that this room is pretty cluttered. Some might say that it's not very presentable. Well, I really like this place. But by changing nothing else but the lens, we can completely change the way this whole place looks. I'm gonna swap out for a 50mm lens, so I'm gonna push the camera back, but I'm gonna stay in the exact same position, and you're gonna watch some of the clutter melt away. Then I'm gonna switch to a 200mm lens, and it's just a whole different story. So now we're at a 50mm focal length. That's said to be basically like the focal length of your eyeball. So this is the perspective that your eye sort of has. When you read that, it doesn't mean exactly what you think because it's pretty zoomed in. Like camera is like, I don't know, 20 feet away from me and you only really see this much room. Obviously, if you're standing 20 feet away from someone, you can see way more than just their outstretched arms. But yeah, I mean, your field of view would be widened, but this is the look. This is the look everything would have. So you can literally change the shape of your head and body by just switching the focal length. And I'm going to show you that right after I show you how we can change the feeling of a room. As you increase your focal length, we went from 16mm to 50mm, it changes the backgrounds in your photos. So what you might have noticed, I'm going to skip back and forth, you'll see that the back wall, it seems like it moved forward really far. I didn't move at all. I'm still at my little desk here with all my little lenses set up. That wooden crate has like slid forward. The back wall looks way bigger. The garage door in the back looks bigger. All the stuff on the sides would have disappeared, and you're left with less distracting things and more of just me. So there's one way you can control a room or control a scene. It works the same way outdoors, just by changing the lens length. However, if you're gonna get to the extremes, we're gonna go to 200mm. At 200mm, most of the background is gone. I mean, it's pretty much just the back garage door and nothing else. So you can really clean up a room by just increasing the focal length and pushing the camera back. The problem with that is I'm 45 feet away from my camera, and in most cases, that's not very convenient. However, things like if you're taking portraits in a park, this is a great way to like get rid of the distracting backgrounds. If there's a lot of people, the people disappear. There's only a chance for the people to be in that 5-degree view area. And so you could have people sitting in a park all around you and they wouldn't be a part of your photos. They wouldn't be distracting the main subject of your photos. So you can see just by changing the focal length, but not changing anything else in the scene, you can completely change the way the scene looks. I'm in a messy warehouse right now, but all you see is a metal door behind my head. You could use this for, I don't know, you could give an interview in here and you wouldn't even have to clean the place up. You just have to back up the camera. One of the super handy things about staying in the same DSLR family, this is an F-mount camera. It doesn't matter what price range your camera is, all of the lenses, even if you get pro lenses, will fit on the cheapest, littlest camera. They don't all work just the same way. Some of the lenses have a motor in them, some of the lenses require a motor to be in your camera. These cheaper cameras don't have the motor in the camera. The benefits that you're paying for with a nicer camera is that this is weatherproof. It can shoot way faster. Everything turns on a lot faster. It's got 2 memory card slots so you can take more pictures before reloading. It's higher resolution. It can take 4K videos. You can control it with your phone. It can wirelessly send pictures back to your computer. The battery lasts way longer. The sensitivity and darkness is way better. There's way more buttons. All the settings are just easier to get to. I almost dropped that. But as far as what the actual photo will look like, most of the work is done in the lens. Crappier cameras are just more frustrating to use. Taking photos that are not on the extreme ends, not in total darkness, taking regular photos, taking headshots, taking street photography in a city or whatever, these two cameras would be able to take the exact same photos. Just with the nicer camera, it's more convenient and it's easier to do it. There's also two types of lenses altogether, a prime lens and a zoom lens. This is an 85mm lens. This is also an 85mm lens. It's just also a 50mm lens and a 70mm lens and a 100mm lens all built into one. Obvious pros and cons are this is super heavy, where this is really light. If you want all these focal lengths with you at any given time, plus more, because 50 is actually kind of long. I carry these two lenses with me when I'm out shooting. This is an 18 to 35, this is a 50 to 100. So it has every focal length from 18 all the way to 100mm. If you're gonna do that with prime lenses, they're tiny and light, but if you wanted to cover the whole gambit, you'd need a whole bunch of these things. So if it's the lens that's doing so much work to make photos look the way they look, like how are you making your choice for which lens? Well, let's go through that a little bit. So not only can you reshape the scene, so to speak, with your different focal lengths, but something you may not know is you can actually reshape your face. The tale of two Nicholases. These two shots were taken just minutes apart and standing in the exact same place. One at 16mm, one at 200mm. But you can see that the Nicholas on the right has like a flatter, wider face, almost like a fatter head, like a square-shaped head. Even my body looks it just looks different. Everything looks different. For me, it would appear I love life at 16mm if I'm taking pictures of myself. But every subject is different, and this is just one more lever of control you have over your final photograph. So you can see that zooming in isn't necessarily the only reason you want a longer lens. I guess that's why we end up with a whole bag full of lenses by the time you've established what you like to take pictures of. If your face is consuming the full frame of a picture, depending on which lens you use, obviously the camera's going to be closer or further away from your face, but it drastically changes the shape of your face. Sarah and I went on a field trip for a little photo shoot out to the front yard of the warehouse to illustrate this. So as we go through these pictures, you can see obviously the background, dramatically gets pulled forward. It's almost like you're like making the background seem shorter, like all the stuff behind you gets closer. Not just like it's zoomed in, but it feels closer. People call that background compression or lens compression. But we don't tend to notice because, I don't know, because our brains are so good at adjusting to what we see, and because we watch enough TV that we've seen different lens focal lengths often enough that it doesn't freak you out. But if you're at like this is a 10 to 20, so this is a very extreme example, the fisheye lens, this is my wife. But if you're at 100mm, this is my wife. And you can see there's a really big difference in like the shape of her face. Her ears disappear and get tucked back. And then as we like thumb through all the pictures on the way from the fisheye lens out to the long lens, everything about your face changes a little bit. Your eyes sort of like get further apart. Your nose gets more or less bulbous. And your face kind of flattens out at a longer lens. As a matter of your own personal preference or the model or whatever your subject is, you want to figure out what you find to be the most pleasing at which focal length. Another example, this is my truck downtown Orlando. You can see just with these couple of pictures, the shape of the truck looks wildly different. So when you're looking at like automobile advertising, depending on what lens they're using, that vehicle is not going to look necessarily exactly what it looks like to you when you walk up to it. If you're looking through a 10mm fisheye lens, everything's round, everything's weird. If you're looking through a 300mm super zoom, everything looks a little flat. Everything also looks unnatural. You don't notice it as much. It's a little more subtle, but faces are flattened, scenes are flattened. The second thing you want to consider when you're choosing a lens, if you're buying your first set of lenses, is aperture size, the f-stop number. The aperture is a physical thing. It's these little fins that make up like the hole inside the lens that lets light in. And depending on how you want your picture to look, that hole is bigger or smaller. So if you have a really wide aperture, a lens with a 1.8 or a 1.4 is considered a fast lens. It's a wide aperture. It's going to let more light in from a wider angle. When you're taking a picture, you have control over the aperture size. And the aperture size controls the blurriness of the background of the photo. The level of blurriness in the background of a picture is determined by the lens, not the camera. Right now we're shooting at 1.8. So now we're at f16. So with the smaller aperture, which is a higher f-stop number, you'll notice that the background of this now is more in focus. You can see all the stuff back there. However, you're sacrificing a lot of light. So the aperture size controls the depth of field. It controls what's in focus versus what's out of focus in the background. At f16, most of this picture should be mostly in focus. Whereas back down here at f1.8, most of the background should be out of focus, while I should be in focus, which does a lot to draw your attention towards your subject. Sometimes your subject is the entire scene though. Sometimes you don't have a person standing in the middle. That's where you'd want to shrink down the aperture, crank up the f-stop number to make everything in focus if you're taking a picture of a mountainside. One attribute that makes one lens more expensive than another is its maximum aperture size. That's especially true with zoom lenses. Apparently the witch doctor voodoo black magic that allows a lens to stay at f1.8 through its entire focal length is especially complex and therefore costs a small fortune. That's it for now. Hopefully if you knew nothing at all about interchangeable lenses, I was able to give you some sort of insight into picking your kit. Or hopefully if you're well into this stuff, maybe I touched on something that you hadn't thought of in that way before. Either way, please hit the like button below and subscribe to the channel for more. I think I'm gonna go pick up some food and then go home and look at Sarah through my 50mm eyes.